Will the 400-pound strongman use 100 grams of protein? He might. He's going to use a lot more of it than the 120-pound woman would. So no matter how much protein you eat, you will absorb it. What your body does with it once it gets into the bloodstream is a different story. I created Species Nutrition with one mission in mind: to provide bodybuilders and serious athletes with no-nonsense supplements that work. I put my name and reputation on every bottle of Species Nutrition products. If you want to be your absolute best, join the evolution.
RX Television, RXMuscle.com. This is Ask Dave, your 30-minute question and answer show with Dave Palumbo. Bodybuilding, non-bodybuilding, diet, training, supplementation. We got you covered. We are just a week out from the Arnold Classic, so a week and a day from now, Dave, myself, Chris Aceto, Lee Priest will be there as well. We're trying to convince Jimmy the Bull to be there too, but Don Hansen. Right, yeah. So we're going to have a good crew out there, but it's going to be a lot of fun. Obviously, the storylines might be a little singular with the open class. Classic Physique might be a little bit more of a robust battle, but nonetheless, it's going to be a fun weekend. There's going to be a lot going on, and it's, look, when we have these big contest weekends, Dave's going to be there. You never know who's going to show up as far as, our wrap-up videos, stuff that we do in the expo. But we do promise you wall-to-wall coverage and a lot of cool content features over the course of the next week. And then, of course, next weekend in Columbus.
I think we should do a poll, Sid, on who, forget the bodybuilders, who do our viewers want to see me go up and interview in the expo hall? What
you mean? Hold on, you mean confront, right? Because that's the thing on YouTube now.
Confront. There you go.
Live in-person confrontation. Yeah. We'll get the whole thumbnail of you looking serious, them looking serious. That's what's going to sell on YouTube nowadays. So
who am I going to confront at the expo? Let's take a poll, and ask who you'd like to see and who you think I might confront. So
who do you want to see confronted? Who do you want to see Dave confronted? Who do you want to see possibly if Jimmy the Bull comes out? Who do you want Jimmy the Bull to talk to at the end?
If I get Jimmy the Bull to come out, I might have to have Jimmy confront a few people for me, that will not bode well for them,
No. But it would be hilarious, and the viewers would get their money's worth. Let's go to the questions. We have a ton of questions to get through. The first two questions on this show from
You know what, Sid, before we do that, I want to just remind everyone that this weekend is the Secrets to Becoming a Diet Guru course on Saturday, the 24th of February.
The link is below, by the way, so it's right in the first line of the article description.
You can sign up the day of the class if you really want to, but I recommend, if this goes up Wednesday, you should definitely try to do it on Thursday or Friday. I know everyone waits till the last minute, but it's going to be a great class. I'm reinvigorated. I haven't done this for a while, so I got a lot of new information too we're going to be providing. So I think you guys are going to really love this class. It's probably the best $600 you'll ever spend. It's one day, 8 hours, it's really 9 hours with an hour for lunch, but the amount of information that I will provide to you will be invaluable. And if you haven't taken the class before, or if you want to just get a refresher, I highly advise it, because if you're coaching people on a regular basis and you need to know the science of what you're doing so that you can troubleshoot things, you can make sure you're doing things the right way, it's never, ever too late to expand your information base. I'm always learning new stuff every single day. I'm adding to my repertoire. And I'm constantly modifying the class because I'm always learning new stuff, and there's new stuff that comes out in the science world, in the nutrition world, in the supplement world, in the peptide world, for sure. That's probably the most change that's going on there. And these are all things that get incorporated into the class. So if you want to stay up to date, you got to take this. It's tax deductible. If you're a coach and you pay a lot of money in taxes to the government, you can write this off. It'll be a great day. Plus, you can watch the replay unlimited amount of times. And I will be giving everyone you'll be able to download my 100-page Secrets to Becoming a Diet Guru manual that I've accumulated over 30 years in the business, all my protocols in there, a lot of great reading stuff that we won't even talk about in the class, but that stuff you can go back and reference for yourself, all profiles on all the drugs, all the nutritional supplements. I'm telling you, this is an invaluable class. Don't miss it.
So with that, the link is right in the first line of the article description. So if you want to sign up for Dave's Diet Secrets of Becoming a Diet Guru course, which is this Saturday beginning at 9 a.m., it is online, so you don't have to go anywhere. The registration link is below. Let's go to the questions. Again, the first two questions on the show from the Dave Palumbo Experience app. The best way to control carpal tunnel with GH use. I respond differently to pharmaceutical brands, Pfizer, Merck, Cinnatropin, etc. Currently using 6IU 4 days a week and 2IU 3 days a week. I know I could lower the dose, but my hands are numb during the day.
Yeah, he said it. He really did say it. The problem is that you're taking too much. And sometimes that happens when you just start out too high. A lot of times if you ramp up slowly over the course of several weeks, it doesn't happen as badly. And I think it's because when you hold an enormous amount of water really quickly, it's like your body can't adapt to it. And so it pinches off those nerves in the wrist here, and then your hands get numb. And obviously, if it's one thing if you just, sometimes you fall asleep on your hand, you wake up, it's numb, and then it goes away. But if it's there all the time, it's very annoying. So my suggestion is stop the GH for like 2 days. Probably the carpal tunnel pins and needle feeling will go away. Start up at 2 IUs per day. If you tolerate that, go up to 4 IUs. And then if you tolerate that, you can back it up to 6. I don't think you need to take 6 if you have real serostim, or I think you had mentioned you had pharmaceutical GH. You probably can stick with 4. If you can get up to 6 without the tingling and you want to do that, that's fine. But really 4 is probably more than sufficient. I felt that was the sweet spot when I did it. If I would do more than 4, I would get super, super bloated, and I just didn't feel any better. I felt worse, actually. So try 4, but back it down first. It happens to a lot of people. When I used to take GH, that never happened to me. I used to get my wisdom teeth used to move around, and they used to hurt. And I actually had to have one tooth pulled out like 6 weeks before a show, and I had another one done the following year around the same time. So my bottom ones are out. My bottom ones are out. My top ones are still there. They never came through, but that's definitely something that can certainly happen. So wisdom teeth, sometimes some elbow pain or joint pain, and very commonly the tingling of the hands.
Second question. Again, these questions from the Dave Palumbo Experience app. Yohimbe for fat loss. Your thoughts?
Back in the day, Dan Duchaine had this theory that, Yohimbe is an alpha-2 antagonist, receptor antagonist. Now, normally we think of beta receptors when we talk about the blood vessels, right? Beta-1 receptors make the heart beat faster if you stimulate them. If you block them, you take a beta blocker, it slows your heart down. Beta-2 receptors open up the airways and the blood vessels. Beta-3 receptors theoretically stimulate fat burning. So, clenbuterol, which is a beta-2, beta-3 agonist, causes fat loss. When we talk about alpha receptors, they work a little differently. When you block alpha-2 receptors, which are found predominantly, by the way, in estrogen-dependent fat cell areas. So estrogen-dependent fat cells have a lot of alpha-2 receptors on them. When you block them, it does the opposite of what you would think. When you block alpha-2 receptors, you increase norepinephrine or adrenaline release in those nerve terminals, and it can mobilize fat. Theoretically, in theory, whether it works or not. So Dan Duchaine's theory was that you could inject Yohimbe directly, or
I found this.
Siri found something for me. If you can inject Yohimbe in injection form into fat resistant areas that would be, especially for women, like cellulite, he theorized that it would cause fat loss. They did come out with, a couple people came out with some injectable Yohimbe things, and I just didn't see that happening. But theoretically, that's how it would burn fat, only in estrogen-dependent fat cells. Now, does it work? I don't know. Do people take oral Yohimbe all the time? I would stop at 2 weeks out, because what Yohimbe does do is it increases the presence of a hormone known as antidiuretic hormone, of vasopressin, and that hormone, same name, different name, same hormone, which is produced from your pituitary gland, can cause fluid retention. So Yohimbe induces fluid retention via that pathway. So you don't want to take Yohimbe 2 weeks out from a show. So you stop it. Personally, I don't think it really burns fat. Back in the day, before there was Viagra and Cialis, a lot of guys used Yohimbe because they said it was an aphrodisiac. Don't know if it ever worked that well. Certainly didn't work as well as Viagra and Cialis did. And then it was speculation for a while that taking Yohimbe would actually increase testosterone output. And I think that was a misnomer, because I think people felt we're using it as as like kind of like a Viagra-like drug. So people just assumed that it was because it was increasing testosterone. Didn't really do that. So it's had a lot of different uses. Some people use alpha Yohimbe although it might be banned now, in pre-workouts, and it actually mentally stimulates you a little bit when you combine it with caffeine. So there's different versions, but either way, whatever Yohimbe you might be using, stop it at 2 weeks out. Now, these two questions were from the Dave Palumbo Experience app. That's my app. It's $29 a month. You download it from Android or iTunes store, and you get me as your coach in the back pocket, essentially. I answer all your questions in an open forum in the app, so everyone sees everyone's questions and answers. All my videos, all my articles I've ever written, all in one place. We put up a workout every week. I do a special Q&A video, just like Ask Dave here, except you get an extra one every week in the app for the app members. And it's very a lot of people love the app. The membership has grown exponentially over the years, and I want to thank everyone for supporting it. Like I said, for $29 a month, you get me as your coach.
Let's go to our Facebook and Instagram questions. Again, if you're not already following us on Facebook, just go into the search bar, RX Muscle, on Instagram, official_RX Muscle. Let's go to Andrew Apuzzo. Your thoughts on the new research out that your body can utilize 100 grams of whey protein post-workout. It has always been said that you couldn't.
Well, here's where I think people don't understand. First of all, these studies that do these things where they give a big bolus, 100-gram protein, they don't really tell you what else these people are eating. So a lot of times they don't eat anything else. They eat nothing. They work out. They'll give them 100 grams of protein, and then they see what it does. Well, if you're protein starved, it's going to obviously use a lot more protein than if you're not protein starved. If you were eating every 3 hours and you get to your fifth meal of the day and you eat 100 grams of protein, will you absorb 100 grams of protein? 100%. You absorb everything you eat. Will you utilize the 100 grams of protein for building and repairing muscle? Absolutely not. Okay. Will the 400-pound strongman use 100 grams of protein? He might. He's going to use a lot more of it than the 120-pound woman would. So no matter how much protein you eat, you will absorb it. What your body does with it once it gets into the bloodstream is a different story. If your body needs it because you have an enormous amount of muscle mass on your body and you need a lot of protein to repair it, it will use a larger percentage. If you're smaller and you don't have as much muscle and all the muscle has enough amino acids already, and remember, your body can't store protein. There's no storage for protein. So what does it do? It converts it into carbs. It'll burn it up for energy. It'll do something with it, And so you always can absorb whatever you eat. It's whether you utilize it or not. So if you could always create a scenario whereby your body is protein deficient enough that you're going to absorb a larger bolus amount and utilize it for building muscle, or repairing muscle tissue and/or enzymes, hair, nails, skin. Remember, everything in the body uses protein to repair itself. So depending on the need for the body, that will dictate how much you use. But would you rather eat 6 small meals throughout the day so you assimilate those meals and use every ounce of that protein for building and repairing muscle? Or would you rather risk it and say, I'll just eat it all in the morning and hope that my body utilizes it the whole day? Well, I got news for you. By the end of the day, that protein is going to either be done and metabolized or turned into energy or gotten rid of, and you're going to have not enough protein later in the day. So the answer to the question is that the most efficient way to grow muscle, and we figured this out, Arnold figured it out, back before them, is to eat frequent small meals throughout the day of protein, throughout the day that you're awake, and not to go large stretches of time without it, and not to try to overeat protein because you missed a meal earlier. The worst thing you can do is miss a feeding. because of the fact that your body can't store protein. It can store fat, save it for later. It can store glucose, carbs, as glycogen in the liver and the muscles and use it for later. Can't do that with protein. And that's why we must split up our meals and eat small, frequent meals. And that's the reality. You can create any kind of crazy concoct a study. It doesn't mean that that's a better way of doing things. But what do I know? I'm an old guy from the 80s. I haven't changed my theories in years.
Palumbo needs to update himself. Let's go to more on that later. Clint Istais or Istais, apologies if I butchered the pronunciation. The most insane body part that you've ever seen, was it Matarazzo's calves? Were there any bodybuilders who absolutely blew your mind when you met them in person in shape?
You know who had really freaky calves? Eric Fankhauser. I don't know if you remember Eric Fankhauser. He had the craziest, freakiest calves of all time, probably. But Dorian had some crazy calves, really crazy calves, believe it or not. Calves seem to be the thing that sticks out in a lot of people's minds of bodybuilders that just had ridiculous-looking body parts. I mean, Platz had the greatest legs of all time, and I say that, crying because, I know I had good legs. They were not as good as Tom Platz's. So there was guys with some seriously freaky arms. I mean, Ronnie Coleman had 24-inch arms. I mean, they were pretty impressive. Lee Priest has some fucking crazy ass arms. If you ever saw him in person, I'm talking when he was young, they were just outrageous. So there were people with crazy body parts over the years. I mean, Joel Stubbs had probably the best back of all time. It was like it's funny because he was an airline pilot. He looked like an airplane from behind. He had a bigger back than Ronnie did, but he had torn his quads like earlier in his life, so his legs were just never as good as his upper body. But he had the sickest back I've ever seen. It was crazy. I mean, Dorian's back in person was pretty outrageous too. I got to tell you, I saw him in the gym training, and the slabs of beef that was on that back is crazy. Kai Green's back is pretty absolutely wacky, over the top. Kai's glutes, as Bleckman would say, were pretty insane too. And Ronnie had some insane glutes when he was in shape. So there were a lot of people with freaky body parts, over the years that I've seen. For some reason, everyone remembers calves. I don't know why. Calves just seem to be like this body part that sticks out, because I think a lot of people don't have them. Matarazzo's calves were freaky, but I think Eric Fankhauser's were better. And I think that Nasser had pretty good calves. Nasser got mad at me. I didn't know this. He was mad at me for about 6 months because I had told our friend Josh Friedman, who was friends with him, that when I saw Nasser, when I saw Nasser, I broke his balls. I said, "Do you put synthol in your calves?" He likes to ask like sarcastic questions like that to me. And he was insulted. But I didn't know he was insulted. He goes, "No, these are my real calves." And so he told my friend Josh that he was mad at me. And I said, "Why is he mad at me?" Because you told him, you asked him if he put synthol in his calves. I said, "That's a compliment. If he doesn't put synthol in his calves," I said, then that was the best compliment he ever received. I said, and he forgave me for that. And then he didn't like something else I said, obviously. But the point is that he had some really big freaky calves. They weren't like long, but they came out. They were like fucking like about 6 inches wide. So there have been some impressive guys over the years, for sure.
Well, I was gonna say seemingly half the stories that involve Nasser and you start with Nasser was mad at me or Nasser was upset at me.
Because he usually was.
Those lines.
Yeah.
Let's go to Chris Hulk Williams. Still awaiting an insightful and honest opinion on follistatin.
Theoretically, on paper, follistatin blocks myostatin. Okay, but the problem is that you need, in order to get the benefits of blocking myostatin, it has to be blocked all the time. Okay, that means 24 hours a day. You can't just block it for an hour a day by taking a shot of follistatin. Okay, and follistatin doesn't last. All these protein hormones don't last in the body for a long period of time. So until someone comes up with a way to block myostatin all the time, you're not going to get the benefits of it. The theory on paper, and I don't know if anyone's come up with an actual practical application of this, would be to find a way to create a CRISPR, viral vector, meaning you take this CRISPR gene, which is basically a scissor. It's like a genetic scissor, and you put it into a virus that's not non-virulent, that can't cause any kind of sickness. And then you inject it into someone's body, and then that virus replicates and goes into every cell in everyone's body, and the CRISPR gene cuts out the myostatin gene so that the body can't produce myostatin anymore. And then if your body can't produce myostatin anymore, now you can get the benefits of not having myostatin, which is when you remove myostatin, you can grow at a much more accelerated rate because myostatin limits the amount of muscle growth in the body. It's some kind of a regulatory step. Supposedly Flex Wheeler has no myostatin genetically. That's what Victor Conte had tested a bunch of pro bodybuilders back in the 90s. And supposedly, I think Livroni and Flex had no myostatin or something like that, but which would explain why they were such hyper responders. But aside from that, someone creating that technology, there's no way to really, right at this time period, to take enough follistatin or to keep it in your body irregularly enough to actually get any kind of myostatin blockade that would actually be significant. Because even if you block it half the day, it's not enough. It's got to be basically gotten rid of or nullified, or I know there was some doctors out there saying, oh, I have this shot, it gets rid of myostatin for 2 years. It doesn't exist. It's not out there yet, but I'm sure it's coming.
Let's go to Mike Molinaro. Is there a way to mitigate hair loss with a DHT compound like Masteron or Primobolan if you're prone or not to male pattern baldness?
All right. This is something Sid I was going to address in a separate video, and I probably will anyway, because some moron, one of these internet morons out there that think they know more than everything. And whenever anyone puts me down, because I don't really put anyone down really out there, whenever someone puts down my knowledge base, I mean, you're pretty stupid to do that, because I think I'm pretty much established myself as being pretty knowledgeable in nutrition, diet, supplements, performance-enhancing drugs. I mean, I don't think there's many people that would say I don't know what I'm talking about. You know what I mean? And if they are, they're morons. Okay, I know what I'm good at. I know what I'm not good at. Okay, I'm not good at fixing cars. Okay, I'm not going to try to pretend that I can go out and fix a car, because that's not what I do. But I know what I'm good at. And the reason I'm good is that, and why I'm still good at it, is because I do it on a daily basis every single day. I don't stop. And, drugs, we call them DHT drugs. I don't know why we call them that, but they're similar in structure to DHT. And I talked to Patrick Arnold about this the other day. And that's why I'm going to give you his read, because Patrick Arnold is a chemist, and he knows, everything there is to know about steroidal compounds. The guy's a genius. Drugs like Primobolan and Winstrol, Masteron, these are drugs that have a similar structure to DHT. They're not DHT. They don't act like DHT. DHT, pure DHT, has an effect on the body to cause hair loss, acne in people who are prone to it, prostate enlargement. Okay, when you're an adult. When you're a kid, it's responsible for developing the secondary sex characteristics of a man. Strong jaw, the growth of the penis, all those things. And that's why when women take drugs that have a lot of DHT in them, they can get all the secondary sex characteristics of a man. They can get hair, facial hair, their jaw can grow, their clip can grow, all these things that they get because it's a side effect of DHT. Now, just because Winstrol and Primobolan and Masteron are similar in structure to DHT, their androgenic component, meaning the masculinizing component of that drug, is greatly reduced. Because what they've done is they've tried to get rid of the androgenic component and have a higher percentage of anabolic component, meaning muscle building. And that's why they did it. Now, Anavar, they've essentially stripped away all of the androgenic component of it, and it only has an anabolic component. So you get no side effects from it. Okay? Zero. And women can take it. It doesn't affect their voice. It doesn't do anything to them, because they've also, when they reduce the androgenic component of a drug, they also remove some of the anabolic or muscle building qualities. So Anavar, while it's purely anabolic, it is the weakest anabolic, but it doesn't have any androgenic side effects. So it's really good for women to take. Likewise, Primobolan and Winstrol are not that strong anabolically speaking, but they have very, very little androgenic component. And that's why I tell people they don't cause hair loss. They don't cause male secondary sex characteristics. People have it in their head. It's DHT. It's the same thing. It's not. It's not. I know I'm an old school thinker, and I'm from the 90s. But guess what? The science doesn't change. Sorry about that, guys. Just because you guys have TikTok and we didn't have TikTok in the 90s doesn't mean that you know more than we do. Science is the science. If you want to come on and debate it, we can debate it all you want. I don't care. I'm willing to do it. The science. I'll bring on Patrick Arnold. You can bring on your TikTok companion there, and we'll have a nice debate about it. I have no problem doing that. And that's the reason why. So if you take Primobolan and Winstrol, you're not going to lose hair, okay? Any more than, okay, Now, if you take testosterone, you see, this is what people do. They're on testosterone and they stack it with Primo and Winstrol. They're like, oh, I got all this hair loss from the Primo and the Winstrol. Well, don't you think it's from the testosterone? Because we know that testosterone converts to DHT, and DHT is the strongest drug or the strongest hormone to cause hair loss, to cause prostate enlargement, to cause acne. So why would you blame the Primobolan and the Winstrol when you're taking testosterone at the same time? And that's the reason why I said when I first did my first cycle of Primobolan and Winstrol, I got no side effects from it. I didn't even get much suppression of my testosterone. I got blood work right after I finished the cycle, and I was still producing testosterone, which obviously meant that I wasn't suppressing, because those compounds don't convert to estrogen. Estrogen is what suppresses your own endogenous testosterone production. So take it for what it's made. I know I'm only an idiot, but that's the science. Sorry, guys.
Let's go to Eloise Oitel. Do you think semorelin or GH would be cardioreparative or even test? I have a heart arrhythmia, which weakens the heart muscle.
Well, a heart arrhythmia doesn't really weaken the heart muscle. It make it, beat out of sync. Okay. And there's a lot of different reasons why people get heart arrhythmia. Some of it's genetic. Sometimes there's been some damage to the heart. A lot of times it is genetic, because if you have an arrhythmia that wasn't caused by any kind of like insult or damage to the heart, then probably one of your relatives has ones too. I have like a little weird, ventricular tachycardia if I bring my heart rate up too high. And I know a couple of my uncles had the same thing. So anabolics, are not going to make your heart beat out of control. Taking pre-workouts or a lot of caffeine or Adderall. I know people think Adderall is not a stimulant, but it is. Although Adderall tends to really affect the brain more so than the heart. But taking a lot of stimulants is going to make the heart have to beat faster, and it can throw it out of sync. So you don't want to really take anything that's going to really whack the heart out. Now, also, some people who have arrhythmias are on beta blockers, okay? Because it limits how fast their heart can beat, so it won't throw them out of sync. If you're on a beta blocker, you do not want to take a lot of stimulants, and you certainly don't want to take anything that's going to stimulate beta receptors like clenbuterol. Okay, even though clenbuterol theoretically doesn't affect the heart, I wouldn't risk it. You can't take beta blockers and beta stimulants at the same time. They're going to neutralize each other. You certainly don't want to take ephedrine, which has beta 1 activity. So that's something you have to be aware of. There's certain things you cannot take. Can you drink a cup of coffee? Probably, but maybe 3 or 4 cups of coffee a day, probably not a good idea. Maybe, a Rockstar energy drink, not a good idea. If you have an arrhythmia, limit it. Like if I'm going to be recording TV all day, I might sip a Diet Coke, or I might have my stimuli. I might sip a half a serving of that throughout, over the course of 3 or 4 hours to keep myself alert, but not enough that I'm going to feel my heart, beating out of my chest. And so you have to find where your line is in the sand, so to speak. Everyone's a little different. But I had a guy who was telling me just today, I was doing a consult. He's like, I notice I get like my heart starts beating fast, or I get a little arrhythmia, when I take, when I'm on anabolics. I said, well, do you take pre-workouts? He goes, well, yeah, usually when I'm on anabolics, I'll do a pre-workout, I'll do an energy drink. And he's listing all these stimulants. He does Adderall. I said, well, that's what's causing the arrhythmia. It's not the drugs, because steroids are very slow acting, in the background type of stuff. They don't really do that type of activity. It's something that acts quickly, acutely in the body, that usually will cause the heart to, have a little skip beat or an extra beat here and there, assuming that, it's induced by something and it's not just genetically there. Some people have arrhythmias that can actually fix. They go in there and they ablate, or they kind of kill off a couple of the little nerves that are causing it, and a lot of times that fixes it. So you got to go to your cardiologist and have that diagnosed.
Let's go to Bilal Hamide. He wants to know, he mentioned 2 kg, a fast but safe way to shed 2 kg in a day. And I guess the reasoning for that would be to make your weight limit at weigh-in. So generally speaking, when you have a client that needs to squeeze into that weight cap, what are some of the safe methods, in a 24 or less hour capacity?
Is this for fighting or is this for bodybuilding?
I mean, I would. He is a bodybuilder, so I mean, I would
So I'm
imagine
assuming it's for
bodybuilding.
making weight, because he didn't say for
Yeah,
making weight in bodybuilding, but I'm assuming he does. I
yeah,
mean,
to make
2
to make his
kilograms,
weight limit. Yeah,
yeah, 2 kilograms is not a lot to drop, literally, the problem is when the time of when the weigh-in is. If the weigh-in's in the morning, it makes it a lot easier because you wake up dehydrated anyway. When it's at night, it's like you got to restrict fluid the whole day, and you lose a whole day of carving up a lot of times. So once again, it depends on when it's going to do. If I have a guy who's going to weigh in on a Friday morning, he's going to compete on Saturday morning. That's good because I might give him half a diazide before bed. He'll probably wake up down 4 or 5 pounds right there and make the weight. If it's only 2 kilograms that he's got to lose. If he's got to lose 10, you might have to deplete him from the night before. You might want to, restrict his fluid intake, up until 6 o'clock and make him make weight. Now, if he has to weigh in at like 6 p.m. on Friday and then have a Saturday morning prejudging, that's a lot harder. So what I usually do for those people is I'll carb them up on Thursday, which is kind of counterintuitive because you're going to gain a little weight from that, right? But then I'll hit them with a diuretic before bed, like a half a diazide. And then when they wake up in the morning, I'll weigh them. Let's say they're 4 or 5 pounds over still, okay? I'll hit them with another half a diuretic usually in the morning. I'll tell them to drink a fiberlyze shake to make sure they poop, and then I'll restrict fluid and food all day long. I might have them sip a little, like a half a cup of coffee or something like that. Sometimes like hot coffee will help you poop and stuff like that. And usually by 6 o'clock, they're gonna make weight. And now if they get down, let's say 3 o'clock rolls around and they're below weight, they're a pound or two below weight, I might give them a small meal with no liquids because at that point, eating a couple egg whites or whole eggs is not going to make them gain any weight. And I already got them below weight, so I can kind of coast them into the weigh-in. If they're still low and we're at an hour or two out from the weigh-in and maybe they have a pound or two to lose still, I might have to put them in a sauna, and have them sweat the rest of it out. I don't like to do that, but it depends on how, tough it is to get this weight off the person. You don't want to blast them with a ton of diuretics, okay, because they'll never recover, especially if it's the night before the weight, the prejudging. So it's hard for me to give you a definitive answer because it really depends on when the weigh-in is in relation to when the prejudging is. And that will dictate whatever strategy I happen to employ. But usually it involves a diuretic and fluid and food restriction in some capacity. And I always keep, like I said, fiberlyze in there because the worst thing that can happen is if the person gets constipated from all that dehydration and they can't poop, they're going to feel terrible on stage and their stomach's going to be all distended. So you don't want that to happen.
Let's go to Robert Paul. So, Dave, I know I told you about how this past weekend I did that basketball tournament with a Cooper Flag. So he was there actually, and he reflected the same line that I said about Cooper Flag, that he is the Chris Bumstead of high school basketball, and I said that. Give or
You told
take,
me that.
yeah, he's gonna be the number 1 overall pick in 2025, and he will be the Chris Bumstead of the NBA in 2 years. Full stop. Anyway, so he said he recently had a CT scan for a possible hernia, been having nagging discomfort pain in the area below where the appendix used to be. During the scan, they found scattered lesions in my pancreas, largest 8 millimeters. Blood work came back with my lipase doubled. At a minimum, it's looking like mild acute pancreatitis. Still have an MRI to do. But in the meantime, what can I do diet-wise? I've been using fiberlyze religiously for years. And number two has been solved for something. So, which leads me to believe that the problem being present for some time in pain is from that and not hernia. Although scan shows small hernias on both sides, but pain only on one side.
Yeah, I mean, below the appendix line, that's usually like called a femoral hernia because it runs along the femoral, artery there, vein. So he obviously has some hernias there that might need to be fixed. The pancreas thing, obviously, he obviously was not hurting there because he said the pain was below the appendix line. So that's like almost in your groin area there. So the appendix is up like around under your stomach. So if he's got some pancreatitis, lesions don't really sound so great on you could have pancreatitis where it's inflamed, but lesions worry me a little bit more. I would make sure he gets a CT scan with contrast or an MRI to really get a good visual look at that pancreas. I mean, Greg has pancreatitis, Greg Valentino, we all know that, but his was caused by a blockage. He had a gallstone in his greater papilla duct, which is the duct where the pancreas and the gallbladder kind of feed into the intestinal tract. So that's why he got pancreatitis from backup, but he doesn't have lesions on his pancreas. So The lesion thing kind of worries me a little bit. Like I said, I don't know what would have caused that. So he definitely should follow up and take that very, very seriously, because the pancreas is not something you want to mess around with. And if it does develop into something worse, pancreatic pain is really brutal. You can ask Greg Valentino what he's going through right now. He's on some major pain meds. And so we don't want to see that develop into anything. It's always better to get a CT scan and check it out. I was noticing the other day, like I can almost feel like my stomach emptying into my intestinal tract. It's like I feel like dripping, drip. And I'm like, you know what? I got to get a CT scan. I'm a hypochondriac, but you know what? I'd rather be safe than sorry. And that's, I think, my advice to you out there, who put forth this question. Go get a CT scan. It doesn't hurt to find out.
Let's go to NY Bigger. I heard you mention before that you took testosterone prior to ankle fusion surgery to make sure it heals properly. Can you expound on the healing effects of testosterone, and should people take testosterone prior to certain types of procedures?
Yeah, we know that testosterone increases bone density. I mean, that's a pretty established, benefit of it. And that's really what I was worried about. Because when they do an ankle fusion, if the thing doesn't fuse, they got to cut your ankle off. They got to cut your foot off. And so that would not be an option for me. Okay. I know some people don't mind. Some people are like, oh, cut it off and you'll have a prosthetic. You'll be much better. I'm like, no, that's all right. I'm a little too vain. I think I'll keep my ankle. And so, testosterone definitely has a bone strengthening effect. It also obviously increases muscle mass, and it helps recovery. It makes you stronger. So, I mean, every benefit you could possibly want in a situation where you're having some kind of a surgical event, especially an orthopedic surgical event, was good. Now, interestingly, when I had my shoulders replaced, I didn't use any testosterone replacement because, remember, I was still in the process of having my kids at the time. So I didn't want to mess up my fertility. Now, I was on HCG, which obviously raised my natural levels to reasonable, respectable amounts, and obviously helped me heal. Had I taken testosterone, I probably would have healed faster, I'm sure. But you do what you got to do. So I definitely would advocate the use of that. And you know what? I really like the healing peptides, BPC 157 and TB 500. Unfortunately, now the rejuvenation clinics and the life extension clinics can't prescribe them anymore. So that's unfortunately, the only place to get them is through like these gray market peptide websites. But they definitely work. And of course, GH works too. I didn't use any growth hormone because, remember, I had thyroid cancer. So I was a little worried about that. I don't want to, if I had any dormant cells, I don't want to stimulate anything. But GH with the testosterone would have probably been a better combination for sure.
We do get a lot of insulin related questions. How much insulin needs to be used, and for how long to see the size gaining anabolic effects?
I mean, we get this. This is like probably one of the most common questions we get. When I talk about insulin usage, I really been talking about it from a health perspective because, I view insulin use a lot differently today than I did 20 years ago when I was experimenting for the first time with it in 1995, because no one really knew. I felt like everyone else does today who doesn't really understand insulin. I felt that, if you take extra insulin, you're going to grow better. But I knew that for some reason I wasn't absorbing my food properly because I was eating like an enormous amount of food and I wasn't gaining any weight. So I said, something must be. The only reason I wouldn't absorb my food is I didn't have enough insulin present. And no one had blood sugar monitors back then. So who knows what my blood sugar was, I was eating 1,000 grams of carbs a day, and probably my fasting sugar was probably high. And when your fasting blood sugars are high, that's basically telling your body that, you know what, we don't have enough insulin here to absorb this stuff. Or it could mean you don't have enough insulin sensitivity, meaning you don't have enough insulin receptors. But I've gone through this before. I'm not going to rehash the whole thing. Bodybuilders have great insulin sensitivity because we work out, we eat fish, we take supplements that make us insulin sensitive. So we have good insulin receptors. The only thing that makes us a little insulin resistant would be GH, right? So the problem for bodybuilders is we don't have enough insulin. So if our blood sugars are not doing well, it's because there's not enough insulin around. Our bodies can't produce enough insulin. It's not because there's not enough insulin receptors. So it's silly to take, metformin and all these other drugs that help potentiate your own insulin. You need extra insulin. The question is, how do you do it? Do you take a fast-acting insulin or do you take a long-acting insulin? Back in the day, there really was no long-acting insulin available. No one knew anything about it anyway. So I took what was available from the pharmacy, which was at the time Humulin R, which was really not a super fast-acting. It was kind of like a middle of the road. you got 2 peaks from it. You took it, you got an initial peak. If you took 10 IUs, you got 5 IUs were released initially, and then 2 hours later, you got the other 5 IUs. So it kind of had like a delayed effect, and I would take 2 shots of that a day, so it would basically cover 4 meals for me. All right, so it wasn't bad, and that was, once again, we didn't know what we were doing back then. Nowadays, if you're running high fasting blood sugars first thing in the morning, over 90, okay, but your 2-hour post meals are under 130, which is what they should be, meaning that that means your mealtime insulin use production is good. It's just overnight you're having the problem, and that's what's called first phase insulin failure. So that means your body's giving you signals. Hey, buddy, we don't have enough insulin present, and the way we're letting you know that is in the morning your fasting sugars are too high. If you wait until the post meal sugars get too high, then you're kind of screwed. Then you're going to be really have a lot of damage to your beta cells of your pancreas. So we don't want to get there. So when fasting start getting high, we put a long acting in there. And what that's doing, it's like putting you on testosterone replacement, except we're putting you on insulin replacement, essentially. We're giving your body the insulin that it can't produce, okay? And we're bringing your body up to speed. So now let's say your pancreas was 10% deficient in insulin production. It couldn't produce 10%. It needed 10% more. Now we put that in there by taking a supplemental form of it. Now your body is producing enough insulin. You're waking up, your blood sugars are under 90. Corrected the problem. Now, if we have a person that tends to get fat real easily, and you do this to them and put them on the long-acting insulin, you're going to see they get leaner. They're going to grow better because now they're absorbing their food more efficiently. However, in some people, like who have a very fast metabolism, you do like me, you could put the long-acting insulin and fix that problem, but you still might not see muscle growth because I'm eating so many grams of carbs so many times a day because I got such a fast metabolism, but I'm not really absorbing my meals as efficiently. And someone like me might also need a fast-acting insulin, whether you use like a Novolog, Humalog, which is super fast-acting, or you use the old the R form, Novolin R or Humulin R, which gives you the 2 peaks. Either one of those works fine. That will just help that type of a person with a very fast metabolism like myself to gain weight from the insulin. I'm going to get a benefit. If you give that to someone who tends to get fat easily, you know what happens? They get fatter because they don't really need that extra insulin. So it's not one size fits all. You got to figure out what the physique you're working with. And this is things, by the way, if you like this conversation and this is resonating with you, like, wow, this is good information, this is the type of stuff I'm going to talk about in the Secrets to Becoming a Diet Guru this Saturday. And if you like this, I talk about everything is this involved, the science of everything, nutrition, diet. I break down everything on a scientific level so you understand why you're doing what you're doing. And that's the most important thing. It's not just knowing what to do, it's understanding why you're doing it. That's what we're in this for. We want knowledge. They don't teach this in school. You can't go to college for this, okay? This is the college. I'm teaching you college here. But that's how you figure out what kind of insulin you give a person. Everyone can't do the Milos approach. But if Milos does that on someone with a fast metabolism like me, it works, right? Because we don't get fat, people like me. We just get bigger. You do that with someone who's a fatty, and they're going to be a fat slob, a bloated fat slob on that much insulin. So you have to know who you're dealing with, and that's why every person needs to be assessed as an individual. You can't do a one-size-fits-all for insulin. For steroids, you can do that, not for insulin.
Take one, maybe 2 more questions. I know, Dave, you have Lee and the guys for the Dave Palumbo podcast coming up next. G-Hole community, do you see any benefits to adding Masteron in an off-season cycle?
The truth of the matter is you can use any steroid off-season or pre-contest. Why do we use Masteron, Winstrol, pre-contest? By convention, really. Usually in the off-season, we'll use long-acting injectables, okay, because we get a better, longer duration out of them. They're less toxic, and the person's eating an enormous amount of food. They're a little softer anyway, so it doesn't really matter if they hold a little extra water. So we'll use our DECA with testosterone. We'll use EQ with testosterone. We'll use Dianabol with testosterone. And then usually as we get closer to the show, the last 6 to 8 weeks, we'll switch to compounds that maybe don't hold quite as much water. We're going to still keep our testosterone in there as our base, but we'll use Winstrol, we'll use Masteron, we'll use Anavar, we'll use Primobolan, because they just don't hold as much fluid. So the lean physique looks a little drier. I mean, I know guys that have no money and they've used testosterone alone for pre-contest, and they look great on stage. They just maybe had to take it a little extra diuretic. That's it. But so, I mean, there's no real rules. Does that? And having said that, I know guys that can't take DECA because they can't get an erection when they're on DECA. So they use Master. I have them use Masteron in the off season with testosterone, and it works great. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just, you know, we try to rotate the drugs so we're not using the same drugs all the time. So we save some drugs pre-contest. We have some drugs for off season, but there's really no rules. You can cross use them.
We'll take one more. This is from the Irish Bulldog. For ageless and fine line forehead wrinkles, what type of collagen and or brand do you recommend to build up facial muscle integrity?
I personally, I got to be honest with you, I would not inject any kind of collagen or any kind of fillers into your face, especially if you're a man. Okay. Women can, if it's done, you know, tastefully, then it's fine. But there's nothing worse, in my opinion, of like a big puffy face. Oh, I have no wrinkles. Yeah, but you look like a big puffy face now. Look at Madonna was beautiful, right? I mean, Madonna's face is like so swelled out. I don't know why they do this, but if it's done aesthetically, you know, then it looks good. For wrinkles in the forehead, the best thing to use is Botox or Daxify is that's what I went for. If you watch that video where I went up to my friend's place up in Connecticut, they did Daxify, supposed to last longer. I had it done, a month ago? It's my wrinkles are already coming back. So my body metabolizes the stuff very fast. But Botox never lasted in my body. This stuff lasted a little longer, but not much. But some people get 6 months out of it. So the best thing for wrinkles, like I said, around here and around the eyes is either Botox or Daxify. For, you know, some women, because they get lines here, they don't like it, and they get a little bit of filler in there, but don't puff your face out. It looks terrible. A lot of people won't tell anyone that. I'm telling you guys, it looks terrible. Don't overdo the fillers, please.
That's going to do for this episode of Ask Dave right now on the channel. All new episode of Heavy Muscle Radio. All new episode yesterday of After Hours. We also have a testosterone roundtable experts. Dave, Don Mutasio, and Dr. John. I'm blanking on his name. What's his name? Pierce?
Yeah.
Yeah, Dr. John Pierce. Yeah. So it's a very, very informative, very inclusive, all-inclusive conversation about testosterone, TRT.
Yeah, people liked it a lot. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So we're actually getting requests for, you know,
Part
further
2
editions of, you know, testosterone-related videos. So we may just do that. Also, check that out. If you haven't already done so, subscribe below, hit the notification bell. If you like what you're watching, hit the like button, comment below. And as always, we appreciate all of your supports. Arnold Classic Week coming up. A lot of excitement. So we have a lot for you planned over the course of the next few days, all the way into Arnold Classic weekend, where we will have some fun and we will bring you along for the ride. For Dave Palumbo, I'm Sadiq Faruqi. We'll see you next time.